Hi, I'm Bob, and welcome to Between the Sheets, where we look at Microsoft Excel and related technologies. We can now run structured query language, also known as SQL or SQL, on an Excel worksheet. Yes, we've been able to run SQL in Power Query for a while, and that's great, but I'm talking about doing it directly on a worksheet. I'll talk about the why at the end of the video, but for now I want to talk about the how. And I'm going to assume you already know a little bit about SQL. If it's completely brand new to you, there are plenty of resources available on the web to learn. Two things before we start. SQL doesn't run natively in Excel. It requires a free add-in that you can install with just a few clicks, and I'll show you that in a moment. The second thing, and this shouldn't be an issue, is the add-in uses a flavor of SQL called SQLite. There are a few hardcore features of SQL it doesn't have, but those are things you probably wouldn't need anyway. The good news is it does add a few extras. You can get the documentation at SQLite.org. So let's take a look and see how it works. Now let's install it. On the Home tab of the ribbon bar, I'm going to go over here and click Add-ins. And in search, I'm going to start typing in SQLookup. And there it is. Now you see it says My Add-ins because I already have it installed. So instead, I'm going to show you on my Mac edition of Excel where it isn't installed. Same thing on the Home tab of the ribbon. I go to Add-ins. And I just type in the first few letters. There it is. And now I can click Add. And that's really all there is to it to install it. Now, I'm not going to do that here, and you'll see why in the last part of this video. So let me go back to the Windows installation. So I could just escape out of that. Now, this add-in gives you one function, SQLookup. So let's go use it already. I'm going to put in equals SQL, and notice I type in the first few letters, and it shows me there is that function, SQLookup. So I'll just hit the Tab key. And you see, it gives us the typical Excel syntax help. This is absolutely helpless, this help. It does not do us any good, so I'm just going to ignore it. But let's take a look at what's going on here. I've got this table, and we have customer orders, and we have all this information, first name, last name, and all that. I'm just going to hit the escape key for a moment to get out of that, because what I want to show you is I'm going to click on this table. On the ribbon bar, I'm going to go to the Table Design tab, and you see the name of this table is orders. We're going to use that name. We're also going to use the name of state and variety. Those are columns that are in this table. So for SQL, I'm going to start simple. I want to select all records from this table that are for New Jersey. So let's start putting in that function, SQLookup, and I'm going to use the select command, and I've got to open up double quotation marks. And the select command, this is not case sensitive. None of the SQL commands are case sensitive. Lowercase, uppercase, it doesn't care. So I'm going to say select star right because I want to select all from. Now, you might know that in SQL, you can assign an alias to the data source you're working from. Now, in this particular function, if I don't assign an alias, I refer to the table by a default name, which is just the letter A. And if I have a second table, the default name is B, and so on. We'll come back to that in a moment. So I'm going to say select star from A, where, and I want to grab New Jersey, as I said a moment ago. So remember the column there is called state. So I'm going to say state equals, and I got to open this up in single quotation marks. So I put in a single quote, and the data is case sensitive. So I got to put in capital letters NJ, close that single quote. Now I've got to close the select command, so I have to close a double quotation mark, comma. Where am I getting it from? I'm getting it from the table called orders, and I can just type in the first few letters, and you can see there it says, oh yeah, there's that object called orders. I'll just hit the Tab key to complete that, and you see it's highlighted, so I know I'm on the right track. Open up left square bracket, and there is pound all, right? I want all of the records. So I'm going to double click that, close the bracket, close the parenthesis, press enter, and boom, there it is. Let me scroll a little bit. and we can see there is every row, every record from New Jersey, and we're also looking at every column in that table. Also, you may notice this is a spill function, so you'll want to make sure that you have enough blank space on the worksheet to display the results. And you know this is a spill function because we see this shaded border, and when I click anywhere in the results, you notice the formula is grayed out, but if I click on the first one in the upper left corner, there it's normal and not grayed out. Now, let's say I decided that rather than using the object name of orders, I wanted to use the cell references. I could do that. Let me just kind of delete that, and I can put in, so it's $A, $4. You might wonder why I'm typing this in manually rather than selecting. The reason is if I go and select it with my mouse pointer, it's going to remove the cell references and put in the object name. So I just want to show you. If I do this, and I know this is going to H203, so I go to $H, $203, and close that. You notice I've got that same result. I don't like using that. I'm going to go and undo that, but I just wanted you to see that you can use cell references if you want. Now, it's not very friendly or intuitive to use that default alias of A, so I'm going to assign an alias of orders. Now, the alias that I use doesn't have to be the same as the table name, but I think you'll get fewer errors if you do it that way. And one of the strange things about SQL is that you use alias names before you define them. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to remove that A. I'm going to call it select star from orders. And after that closing quote, now you see this is going to be a little confusing, but you see we've got that orders all. What I'm going to do is after that comma, I'm going to open up in double quotation marks orders, because that's defining the name. And now I put in a comma. So you might think, well, what the heck is this? You're calling it orders here. You're calling it orders here. You're calling it orders there. You know, what's this all about? So remember, this is the alias name that I'm using. This is the alias name I'm defining. This is the object name where I'm grabbing the data. And I enter it, and you can see it still works. We have the same data there. Now let's change this up a bit. Instead of state, maybe I want to grab a variety. So let's say I want to see all the orders of Kona. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to remove that state equals NJ. I'm going to make it variety equals, and in single quotation marks, Kona. Remember, it has to be case sensitive. Close the single quotation mark. There's still that closing double after it. Hit enter. And now I see all these orders of Kona from all these different states. Or let's change it to Blue Mountain or any other variety that I want. So let me get rid of that. And it's okay that Blue Mountain has a space in it because we are putting the whole thing in quotation marks anyway. And you can see these are all of the orders of Blue Mountain Coffee. Now, instead of grabbing every column, maybe I only want the last name and order number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this asterisk, where I said select star, select all, and I'm going to replace it just with those two fields. So I'm going to say select, and I open up left square bracket, last name, comma, order number, close that bracket. Notice there is no comma after that. And now I have last name and order number. Also, as far as case sensitivity, I said before that I had to make sure that when I was grabbing New Jersey, I had to be case sensitive for the state column, and the variety had to be case sensitive there. And here, where I'm grabbing the column names, it's not case sensitive. I know this could be confusing. The data themselves in the table have to be case sensitive, but the headers, those field names, those do not have to be case sensitive. Now, if you want to run this query several times, but grabbing different varieties, instead of hard coding the varieties in the formula, like over here, we've got that Blue Mountain, you could use data validation to create a drop-down list and refer to the varieties in the formula. Here's what I mean. I'm going to go, let's say, into cell J2. And on the data tab of the ribbon bar, I'm going to go and place data validation. So I'm going to go here and choose list. What's the source? Well, I happen to have varieties on another worksheet here. So I'm going to select those. And I'm going to turn off the input message. I'm going to turn off the error alert. We don't really need those. Click OK. And I get this drop down that has all of those varieties there. Now, one real deficiency with Excel's data validation lists is this drop-down arrow doesn't appear if the cell isn't selected. So if I click off it, you have absolutely no way of knowing that there's data validation in there. So I'm going to give it a background color so we know that thing is there. And I'll give it like maybe a light gray. The drop-down arrow itself is going to go away, but at least we know that something is there because of that background color. So now what I'm going to do is, let's go back into the SQL. I'm going to replace Blue Mountain in this formula with a reference to cell J2. But I have to be very careful with the quotation marks. Let me show you what I mean before I actually write out the formula. So when I put in variety equals, I have to put in a single quotation mark like we saw before. So that's where we start specifying the variety. But remember, we have to close that select statement. So we've got a double quotation mark after that. And now I've got to append that J2 to the formula. So I need an ampersand. And then after I reference that J2, I have to append the rest of the formula. So I need another ampersand. And then I need to literally insert another single quotation mark, right, to balance out the opening one that we have in the beginning here. So I got to put that single quotation mark inside, nested inside two double quotation marks. Yeah, this is confusing. It's insane, but we have to do it this way for it to work. So let me go here. Now, we know it's working because we have the column headers rather than an error, but we don't have any data because we haven't selected anything from the drop-down list. So I'm going to go and choose something. And so here's orders of Colombia. Here's orders of Java. Here's orders of Sumatra. So I could go and quickly pick those out and change what the SQL is doing just by grabbing something from that list. Only one problem. What if I want to find records that are either Kona or Ethiopia? Or I want to sometimes choose just one and other times choose among 4 varieties. That's when it's easier to go back to entering the variety directly in the formula. So I'm going to remove that J2 and use an OR operator to make the query specify either Kona or Ethiopia. So now that I went through all the trouble of putting that in, I'm going to go to the editing section and clear all and just get rid of that. So I'm going to go and remove that. So variety, opening up a single quotation mark, equals Kona, or variety equals single quotation mark Ethiopia. Close the single. I have to remember to close the double. It's so easy to make an error here. And there we go. So this shows us a list of all of the orders, all of the last names and all of the order numbers that are for one or the other of those varieties. So it seems to work, but we really aren't sure because there's no variety listed. So let's add that. So in the select statement, where I have select last name and order number, let's go after that order number, comma, and now in another square bracket, let's put in variety and close that bracket, from orders, etc., enter it. And now we can see, yeah, there indeed, there's all the last names, there's all the order numbers, and there's all those varieties, either Ethiopia or Kona. Of course, you could use this with states also. That way, you can see orders from New Jersey along with orders from New York. By the way, this is another thing that can get confusing. We used the OR operator, not the AND operator, because one bag of coffee isn't 2 varieties simultaneously, and it doesn't get shipped to 2 states simultaneously. In general, the OR operator tends to return more results, while the AND operator tends to return fewer results. Anyway, you see the results here are still ordered by order number because that's how the source table is sorted. But I'd rather sort by variety, right? Because I want to have all the Ethiopians together and all the Konas together. But before I do that, I want to make this formula easier to read because it's getting kind of difficult here on that one line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this little down arrow on the end of the formula bar to open it up. And now I can insert line breaks. Now, to insert a line break in Excel, you can't just press the Enter key, right? Because then you're going to enter the formula. You have to press Alt-Enter in Windows or Option-Enter on the Mac. You know, if your fingers reflexively go for the Shift key to break the line, I know I do that occasionally, it's just not going to work. So you have to really make sure using the Alt key or the Option key. So I'm going to go over here where it says From. I want that beginning on a new line. So I'm going to Alt-Enter there. And this where statement, I want that on a new line. And let's say over here where it says Ethiopia, comma, and we've got that quotation mark, I want that opening on a new line. So this is just cosmetic. We're not actually changing anything here in the formula. But now I can actually hit the Enter key by itself, and you see nothing changes here, but it's just easier to read what's going on. And now I can insert a sort operator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click just before the double quote after Ethiopia. Let's go back up here. So there's that double quote after Ethiopia. So I'm going to click before that double quote and after that single quote. I'm going to enter a new line. I'm going to Alt-Enter. And I'm going to say order by, and now in brackets, I want to order by variety, like that. And now you can see, yeah, we've got Ethiopia on top and Kona on bottom. And within each variety within Ethiopia, you see we're still sorted by order number. And if we go down here for Kona, within Kona, we are still sorted by order number. So what about formatting? We have the data we want, but it doesn't look very nice. Functions don't include formatting, but we can format it however we want, though you probably want to resist turning it into a table. Since it's a function, if you convert it into a table, the formula will get removed and it'll get converted into static text. And don't worry, Excel will definitely warn you about that if you try. But you can format the results manually. And here's a cool trick. First, let me just give this a header. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to go to Cell Styles and I'll pick some coffee-ish color like that and center them and bold them. Okay, so here's a cool trick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to format the first two rows in an alternating pattern. So I'm going to leave this row blank without any background color. I'm going to go and grab this row and I'm going to go to the paint bucket there and maybe give that kind of a light color like that. So now I've got a blank background and I have a color background. I'm going to select both of these rows together, put my mouse pointer on the autofill dot, and here's the real cool trick. I'm going to double click that autofill so it autofills down to the bottom, and you might think, oh my goodness, what are you doing? Why are you autofilling? But because this is a function, this is a spell function, autofill did not autofill any of the data. All it did was it autofilled that pattern. So it took those two lines, that alternating stripe, and it filled in all the way down there to the bottom. Now, just be aware here. If you change the formula and the output changes, right, like you choose different varieties or you go back to states or something like that, that alternating pattern might be too few rows or it might be too many rows. Probably aren't going to get that exact. So if you do that, you will probably need to reapply the format. Now, one last thing. What if you use this add-in, then open the file on a computer that doesn't have the add-in loaded? Well, there's good news and there's bad news. So what I'm going to do first is let's go back up here. I'm going to go and save this file and close it. So just Control-S, Control-W, it's closed. So now I'm going back to my Mac installation of Excel. Remember earlier when I said I was deliberately not going to install this add-in in the Mac edition on my computer? Well, here's why. Let me go and open. I'll just press Command-O. So there's the file I was just working on. Let me open it up and check it out. You see, I've got this notice that says, hey, you've got that add-in. Do you want to go and install it? And now I could go and install it. And you see peeking out from behind, there is the results of that add-in working even though I didn't install it. Well, what the heck is going on? How is that working? Well, let me go to the cell there in the upper left corner where we have the function actually happening. And look what's going on in the formula bar. So there's that SQ lookup function, but before that, you see we've got this underscore XLDUDF. That XLDUDF is actually an error. It means that Excel can't link the code to the function that it needs. So right now, it's previewing the correct results, and I can even print this out, but as soon as I do anything to this worksheet that causes it to recalculate, those results are going to disappear. So I'll show you. I'll just make one small change. This is like the very first one. You see the varieties Ethiopia. If I change that to Kona, anytime you make an edit or addition or deletion, anything to a worksheet, the worksheet is going to recalculate. So as soon as I enter, boom, that whole thing gets scrubbed. And now I got this pound name error because I'm using this. It sees that I'm using this function name and it doesn't know what that function is. Even if I undo, I'll just go and press Command Z to undo and I change that back to Ethiopia. It doesn't matter. The fact that this worksheet recalculated means that this function really, Excel no longer sees what's happening with that function. So if you are going to go and share that worksheet with another computer, you want to make sure that that second computer has permissions to install add-ins. Okay, this is all pretty cool, and if you already know SQL, that gives you a big head start. So why would you want to do this? The most likely reason is there may be times when you have SQL queries in another application that doesn't talk directly to Excel, like a web database, and you want to grab those queries and use them on your worksheet without figuring the whole thing out again. So until next time, my name is Bob, and this has been Between the Sheets.